By God, they did it. Like, you all have no idea how legitimately worried I was just all week that they were really gonna ruin Aoi's character with this episode. Like, I thought they would just sort of hand-fistedly throw her back into the plot like they did with Go, and I thought they were gonna really ruin what makes the character work. And that is that I thought they were going to make her the sixth Lost Incident victim or somehow make her the center of the whole thing. But they don't. They keep it true to the character, and that is that above all else, Aoi is just a 16-year-old girl. She's just a 16-year-old girl who had a pretty tough childhood, who's just kind of trying to make a life for herself and for her brother and all this stuff. I felt like they were going to move away from that as they've done with Go. But they didn't. They kept it intact, and I thought like came up with a really neat idea and kind of did something Yu-Gi-Oh hasn't done in a long time. Like maybe not since Zale. And we'll get into what that is, but we'll get there because there is actually a lot to talk about this week. First and foremost, let's talk about what happened last week. Let's talk about that Earth death, and let's talk about the reaction to the Earth death. Because watching the sort of reaction to him dying online, just seeing the general responses on social media and stuff, has been maybe the most fascinating thing I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just franchise whole in a long time. Like, people who don't care about this anime legitimately kind of got shook up and also legitimately started hating Go. Like, it's been really interesting, and I feel like the Go hatred is just sort of the fact that he did all this for this. Like, with Earth's death, we passed a point of no return, and I'm glad that the show is feeding into it. First and foremost, I think that it's also the fact that Earth's death is played up as haunting. Like, you see his limbs chopped off. You see him as he loses bits of his mind, his consciousness, as he says things like, I can't remember. Like, it's very personal and it's made to seem very haunting. It hammers home what death actually means in this universe. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of anime where a lot of people die all the time, and who the fuck cares? Who cares if everyone can just go out through a revolving door? But when you take that time to build up why a death is important, why the loss of a certain life means something to that story, and why it should resonate with the viewer, that to me is when killing a character is really effective and really important. Earth's death is being played up as what is the catalyst to everything that happens next, and that is a really great thing to see. And it's interesting that our next scene is actually Blood Shepherd. Yeah, it's Blood Shepherd with nothing obscuring his face. We get our first look at what he looks like now, this very sort of skinny, gaudy looking guy, interestingly enough. He's over his comatose, paraplegic, I don't know, his mother, and we're reminded of his reason for hating AI and how it is a weirdly human reason. I could totally see, and again, I felt like Blood Shepherd's backstory could have been made more interesting, it could have been shown off better, but it's a reasonable reason to have an issue with technology. And that's the thing, like, they're not showing him as larger than life or the darkest thing ever in that scene. They're just showing him as a guy with issues. He's just a guy going through something right now, and this is how he chooses to rationalize it and tries to live with it. This comes in very important later, but that's a very smart placement of that scene. Then we move on to the Aoi opening scene, which has some brilliant just framing. And why I say that is because if you notice, Aoi is always shown as shorter than everyone else in this scene. She's shorter than Akira, she's shorter than Evan. Now, many of you are saying, well, that's because she's younger, she's a kid, they're like 10 years older than her. Well, framing is important. And the reason it's important in this scene is because this scene reminds you that Aoi's just a kid. She's the least most involved in everyone in this situation. She's the least most jaded. She's dealt with the least amount of stuff relating to the main plot. The scene reminds you how insignificant she is, how she is just one person in a sea of many. This is a nice shot. You might not think about it at first, but it's very important when you remember what's going on in that scene. Akira is talking about how much more he knows than her. Emma's standing in the corner, very strong and independent, showing how much better she thinks of herself than anyone else. These things are important because then when the scene ends and Aoi takes the direction, when she is talking about what they think must be done and how the Ignises must be protected, if you notice, she's almost shown off as being closer in height to them. Now, obviously, she isn't, and they're still taller than her, but this scene is to show that she is taking direction for herself. She's standing up for what she believes in, and she's trying to make her mark in what is actually going on. That's more important, but we'll get to that in a minute. I just want to quickly talk about the Yusaku scene. I'm trying to go in order of what we actually saw everything. The Yusaku scene is important because, first up, I like the way Revolver works the scene. He's sitting there casually. Also, I like that the two are just meeting at a park or something. Like, just something very nonchalant. Our hero and our villain know exactly who each other is. They know everything about each other. So why not? Let's just meet up for coffee or something. Like, I love that Revolver is casual. I love how he talks about everything with this very friendly, very normal tone. Like, this is just anything to him. And as he's doing it, it's a very nice way to remind you that, oh yeah, he's fucking insane. Like, remember, even though Revolver obviously doesn't like Soul Technologies, the thing is that Soul Technologies just did part of his job for him. They killed an Ignis for him. So he's kind of got this happy exterior like, hey, I'll take it. Like, that's sort of a nice bit because you have Yusaku's stoicness sort of being a nice contradiction. And then you have Ai, and Ai breaking down about Earth's death is a lovely little scene. I love the way it's framed. I love that Ai's like, oh, we can just regenerate. We can just come back. I came back from an eyeball. And Revolver, when he describes what happened to Earth, it's very non-personal. You always see in things like this, when they talk about the death of a robot or the death of an AI, they always feel the need to use terms like the soul or their mind or death or anything. When Revolver describes this scene, what actually happened, he describes it as technical as possible. This is what happened. He was digitized, they separated him, they put him in a process they can actually see. He's not a person, he's a computer program. It's a very sad, very twisted little moment. Because again, it goes back to the Aoi thing. It reminds us how small everything is. Like, the thing is that it's a life, but it's still a computer program. It can still be messed with. It can still be tortured. It can still be worked with. And people will not care. It does not matter how much personality any of the Ignises have. They will still just be digitized by these lunatics. And it's a nice scene, and oh god, I loved it. And then we move on to definitely what might be the most single interesting thing in the episode, and that is Aqua sort of giving this memorial to Earth. This scene of her just alone, thinking about Earth, thinking about how she feels about humans, this very philosophical moment as this AI tries to rationalize what's happening and just makes a memorial for her dead friend. It's a very simple scene, but, oh god, it's just interesting to think about. Like, definitely really tossing up, well, are they AI? Are they people? Like, I love the way the episode goes back and forth with this. Like, how it sort of is for our characters who are going through this and have to make these judgment calls. The episode really respects the audience's intelligence about how people think and how they sort of want all these different perspectives and how they can handle it. Then you have Blood Shepherd who just come in and bringing all that hatred back into it, all his own personal feelings. We're not seeing him as a human anymore. We're just seeing him as his weird, evil cowboy look. As he's just like, blow up everything, I don't care, anger, hatred, as that's what ends up taking the forefront of him. That human who's just sad for his mom is now been replaced by this force of anger and hatred that will destroy everything in its path. It's important and it's great, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but then, of course, Aqua gets saved by Emma and Aoi, and the visual of Blood Shepherd in the sort of weird room of doors, I like that. It's simple. It's a very simple trick. It's just he's kind of lost in this weird maze type thing, and he's got to find his way out. What does he do? Destroy, destruction, what he always goes back to. Then we get the Aoi scene, and we get what I loved. We get what I thought brings us back to Zale, and that is that Aoi is important because she's a person who made a decision. Now, obviously, fate put her in a situation where that decision would then be important. Like you had Yuma with the Emperor's Key, but above all else, they really played up that Yuma was just a kid who chose to do what's right. Just as Aoi, when she was a kid, chose to do something to help a friend, and how that's the catalyst for where this is all going. It's just that simple decision, that simple desire to help, that simple desire to be a character who makes a decision. You see, for me, above all else, when I read something, when I watch something, I want to understand why these characters make the decisions they make. I want to feel and understand what they are going through. Like, yeah, you can have all the big plot twists and revelations you want, but above all else, I'm following these fictional people who are going through fictional situations. I want to be able to feel like I'm going through them with them. And having it be that Aoi is not the Lost Incident victim. The Lost Incident victim is some person we're probably not going to meet till the end when Aoi naturally will reconnect with her. But it's just as simple as, when I was a kid, I did this thing, and that then later set everything in motion. Just this very simple thing. It really keeps the character intact, and it's a beautiful way of bringing her important. I wish the scene was maybe paced a little bit better, put together a little bit better. Like, they just take a break from being hunted by a lunatic to talk about childhood memories. I think that's a little awkward, and some of the dialogue in there is a little awkward too, especially when the mom's like, "My important ring that your father brought me." Yay. Some of that was awkward, but I think it works beautifully well, and it's a fascinating bit, and I just really feel like we've been brought back to the idea that characters matter, and what they go through matters, not necessarily the whole story. That's a very simplified thing of what happens in Arc 5 in the first half of this show, but I'm trying to, kind of get to the point. And that was a long way of getting to the point. Wow, here we go. But tell me what you thought below about everything that happened in this episode. Do you prefer it when Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about the bigger plot or just about the smallerness of the characters? Give me all that below. And as always, TCG question of the week. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Advent calendar came out. Why do we have an advent calendar? Why would anyone who cares about Yu-Gi-Oh! Need an advent calendar? Like, what? Like, other than getting a common Hey Trunade reprint or something? Like, who even cares? Do you care about an advent calendar? Tell me below. I'm actually a lot more curious about this than I logically should be. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next week when we get some sibling drama.